I'm Beverly Thompson. I'm 68 years old. And if for decades in structural engineering taught me one thing, it's that the most catastrophic collapses don't happen because of the storm outside. They happen because of the rot inside. I gave my daughter and her husband a debt-free life, a $2 million estate, and my unconditional trust. In return, they handed me a cardboard box and a 10-day eviction notice. They looked at me and saw a grieving, faltering old woman who had lost her husband and now her only child. They saw a relic, a soft target. They didn't know that I actually owned the holding company that holds the liens on their secret debts. They didn't know I was the architect of the very legal ground they were trying to stand on. They thought they were kicking a helpless pensioner to the curb. They didn't know that by tomorrow morning they would be homeless, and I would be the state's primary witness in their federal indictment. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air in the funeral parlor was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of industrial-strength floor wax, cheap coffee, and thousands of dollars worth of white roses that were already starting to brown at the edges. White roses. I hated them. My late husband Leonard had hated them too. He always said they smelled like a funeral, which I suppose was the point. But he had made me promise never to have them at his service. I had kept that promise. But for Jasmine, my daughter, I had no say. I stood by the open casket, my hands clasped behind my back, watching the room. I wasn't crying. I had done my crying in the private dark of my study 3 days ago when the coroner called. Now, I was working. I was observing. It's what I do. I look for stress fractures. I look for load-bearing inconsistencies. And standing 10 feet away receiving the condolences of a line of strangers was the biggest structural flaw in the room. Marcus, my son. He was putting on a master class. He was draped in a designer black suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was standing rigid, his jaw clenched, his body projecting what looked like earth-shattering grief. He was the picture of the devastated young widower, his life cut short by tragedy. It was perfect. It was Oscar-worthy, and it was completely fake. I watched his eyes. That's where the engineering fails. The face can contort, the voice can crack, but the eyes always tell you where the load is really being carried. Every time a guest moved away, his somber expression would cut off instantly, like a switch had been flipped. His eyes would dart around the room, scanning, calculating. He wasn't mourning a wife, he was assessing a crowd. I saw him check his watch, a diamond-encrusted thing Jasmine certainly couldn't afford, 3 times in 5 minutes. He wasn't checking the time, he was checking notifications. I saw the reflection of the screen in his dark glasses. Stock tickers, real estate listings. He was checking the market while his wife's body lay cooling in a box not 10 feet away. Beverly, a voice murmured. I turned to see Vivian, my lawyer and oldest friend. She looked as tired as I felt. Her suit was pressed, but her face showed the strain. She was the only person in this room besides me who knew the layout of the landmines we were standing on. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice low. I'm fine, I said, my eyes never leaving Marcus, just watching the show. Vivian followed my gaze. Marcus was now embracing an elderly aunt, his shoulders rigid. He's good, Vivian admitted grimly. I almost believed him for a second. He's sloppy, I corrected. Look at his hands. Vivian squinted. Marcus's hand was resting on the aunt's back, but his fingers were tapping a rhythmic, impatient beat against the fabric. It wasn't the erratic tremor of grief. It was the tapped cadence of someone waiting for a traffic light to change. He was bored. He's waiting for the intermission, I said. He wants the audience to leave so he can start the second act. A moment later, Marcus looked up and locked eyes with me. For a split second, the mask slipped. There was no sadness in those dark irises. There was only cold, predatory assessment. He looked at me the way a demolition expert looks at a condemned building. He was measuring the charges. Then he blinked, and the sorrow returned. He excused himself from the aunt and walked toward me, moving through the crowd like a shark through water. Mom, he whispered, his voice a fragile, cracked thing. He reached out and took my hands. His grip was firm, cool, and dry. No clammy palms of anxiety, just the steady grip of a surgeon. I don't know how we're going to do this. I just don't know how I can go on without her. I nodded slowly, playing the part he expected. The stoic, shell-shocked mother. We take it one day at a time, Marcus. He squeezed my hands tighter, his fingers pressing into my skin. He leaned in close, lowering his voice so the guests nearby wouldn't hear. And the house, oh God, Beverly, the house. It's just so big. It's so full of her. Every corner, every room. I don't think I can bear to stay there. It's too much pain. There it was. The first charge was set. We'll discuss it later, I said gently. Today is for Jasmine. Of course, he said, pulling back and running a hand over his face. You're right, I'm just so overwhelmed. He turned and drifted back to the crowd, seamlessly transitioning back into the grieving widower role. I watched him go. He thought he was planting a seed. He thought he was preparing me for the conversation to come. He had no idea. He had just confirmed every suspicion I'd harbored for the last 6 months. He's making his move tonight, I murmured to Vivian. Are you sure? She asked. He's talking about the house being a burden, I said. He wants me to think he's doing me a favor by taking it off my hands. He's going to try to evict me. Vivian stiffened. You know the plan. If he pushes, you fold. You do not fight him. You let him think he's won. I know, I said, adjusting my pearls. I built the trap. I know how to walk into it. The silence in the house was worse than the noise of the funeral parlor. The guests had left. The casseroles had been put in the fridge. The performative sympathy had evaporated. Now it was just the three of us. Me, Marcus, and the ghost of the daughter I had failed to protect. I sat in Leonard's old armchair in the living room. It was leather, worn, and incredibly comfortable. It was my sanctuary. Marcus was pacing the room, his dress shoes clicking sharply on the hardwood floors. I had installed myself 30 years ago. The transformation was instantaneous. The moment the front door clicked, locked, the grieving widower vanished. His posture straightened. The hunch of sorrow disappeared. He loosened his tie with annoyance, not exhaustion. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet. My liquor cabinet hand poured himself 3 fingers of my best cognac. He didn't ask if I wanted any. He didn't offer a glass to the empty air for Jasmine. He downed half of it in one swallow and turned to face me. All right, Beverly, he said. His voice was unrecognizable. The tremulous whisper was gone, replaced by a flat, metallic tone. We need to talk. I looked up, keeping my expression vacant. Talk, Marcus. It's been a long day. Maybe we should rest. I don't have time for rest, he snapped. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up his briefcase. It was a large, structured leather case that looked like it could hold a brick. He reached inside and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, decisive thud. Jasmine handled her affairs before she passed, he said, crossing his arms. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of. She knew how difficult this would be for me. I looked at the envelope, then at him. What is that? It's an updated will, he said, and a quitclaim deed. Jasmine signed the house over to me 3 months ago. She wanted me to have it. She wanted me to have security. I leaned forward, my joints popping, and reached for the papers. I put on my reading glasses, taking my time. I needed him to see an old woman struggling to focus. I opened the deed. It was a sophisticated forgery. I had to give him that. The paper stock was correct. The notarization stamp looked authentic, and there at the bottom was my signature, Beverly Thompson. I stared at it to the untrained eye. It was perfect, but I am not an untrained eye. I spent 40 years staring at blueprints, spotting microfractures in steel beams that were invisible to the naked eye. I knew my signature better than I knew my own face. The pressure was wrong. When I signed the B, I press hard on the downstroke. It creates a microscopic indentation in the paper. This signature was flat. It was a high-resolution print or a very careful tracing using a gel pen that flowed too evenly. And the T in Thompsonite trailed off slightly to the right. I never trail off. I end with a sharp, deliberate stop. I don't remember signing this, I said, my voice quavering just enough. You were confused, Beverly, Marcus said quickly. His tone was condescending, like he was explaining quantum physics to a toddler. You were having one of your episodes. You told Jasmine you wanted her to have the house. You said it was too much work for you. You insisted. Episodes. I asked. Don't play dumb, he sneered. You've been forgetting things for months. Jasmine was worried about you. We both were. That's why we're doing this, to help you. He leaned over the table, invading my space. Here's the reality, Beverly. The house is mine. The law is on my side. But I'm not a monster. I know you're grieving. I know you're old. He held up 10 fingers. 10 days, he said. I'm giving you 10 days to pack your things and get out. I've already spoken to a realtor. I'm selling the place. It's too big, and frankly, it's depressing. I'm going to use the money to start fresh, somewhere warm, somewhere without all these ghosts. 10 days, I repeated, to leave my home of 40 years. It's not your home anymore. he said coldly. It's my asset. And if you try to fight this, if you try to drag this out in probate, I will have you declared incompetent. I have the medical records, Beverly. I have the notes about your memory lapses. I will put you in a state-run facility so fast your head will spin. He stood back, triumphant. He thought he had played the ace. He thought he was looking at a broken woman who would beg for mercy. I looked down at the floor. I let a silence stretch out between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I counted to 5 in my head. Then I looked up and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a small, tight lifting of the corners of my mouth. It was the smile I used to give contractors when they tried to tell me that substandard concrete would hold just fine. Okay, I said. Marcus blinked. The sneer faltered. But, I said okay, I repeated, standing up. You're right. It is a big house. Maybe it is time for me to move on. He took a step back, confused. You're not going to fight me. Why fight the inevitable? I said. If Jasmine wanted you to have it, then you should have it. I turned and walked toward the stairs. Wait, he called out, suspicion creeping into his voice. Where are you going? To pack, I said over my shoulder. You said 10 days. I don't need 10 days. I prefer to be efficient. I left him standing in the living room, staring at my back. He looked like a hunter whose prey had just walked willingly into the oven. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. He thought he had won the war. He didn't realize he had just armed the bomb. I walked up the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister I had sanded and stained myself. I didn't go to the master bedroom. I went to the study at the end of the hall. This was my domain. It was lined with books on structural dynamics, geology, and fluid mechanics. It smelled of old paper and lavender scent. I closed the door and locked it. I didn't go to the closet. I went to the corner of the room where a heavy oak bookshelf stood. I wasn't packing clothes. I wasn't packing toiletries. I knelt down and gripped the bottom shelf. It was on a hidden track I had designed 10 years ago. With a firm tug, the entire unit slid forward 3 inches, revealing a gap in the floorboards beneath it. I pried up the loose board. Inside, nestled in the insulation, was a black waterproof duffel bag, my go bag. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I unzipped it to check the inventory. 1 encrypted, military-grade hard drive containing a mirror of my entire financial life. 1 physical folder containing the original deed to the house, kept safe from Marcus's prying eyes. The burner phones, $50,000 in non-sequential cash. And most importantly, a stack of audio cassette tapes. I ran my thumb over the plastic cases of the tapes. These were my insurance. Jasmine hadn't been strong, but she hadn't been silent. In her final weeks, when the pressure from Marcus became too much, she used to come into this study to work. She didn't know I had installed a voice-activated analog recording system in the ventilation ducts years ago, a relic from a paranoia induced by a corporate espionage case in the 90s. I had never turned it off. I had hours of her talking to him on the phone. I had hours of him screaming at her. I had the threats. I zipped the bag. I stood up and took a look around the room. I was leaving everything else. The books, the photos, the awards. They were just things. Structural integrity isn't about the decoration. It's about the foundation. And I was taking the foundation with me. I unlocked the door and walked back downstairs. Marcus was still in the living room. He was on his phone, his back to me. Yes, I know, he was saying, his voice low and excited. She didn't even fight. She's packing now. I think the old fool is actually relieved. Yes, list it for 2.5. We can get a bidding war going. I walked past the doorway. He spun around, startled. You're leaving? He asked, eyeing the single black bag. That's all you're taking. Travel light, I said. I'll send movers for the furniture later if I decide I want it. I walked to the front door. I paused and looked at him one last time. He was standing in the center of my home, holding a glass of my cognac, plotting the sale of my life's work. He looked powerful. He looked victorious. Goodbye, Marcus, I said. Good luck with the sale. Goodbye, Beverly, he said, unable to hide the smirk. Don't forget to leave the keys. I left them on the kitchen counter. I lied. I still had my set in my pocket. I stepped out into the cool evening air and pulled the door shut. I heard the heavy thunk of the deadbolt. I walked down the driveway to my sedan. I tossed the bag in the passenger seat and got in. I started the engine, but I didn't put it in gear. I pulled out one of the burner phones from the bag. I dialed a number I had memorized. It rang once. Hayes, a sharp male voice answered. It's Beverly, I said. I'm out. The target is isolated inside the structure. Did he take the bait? Detective Hayes asked. Hook, line, and sinker, I said. He served me the eviction notice. He produced the forged deed. He's in there right now calling a realtor. Perfect, Hayes said. We have probable cause on the forgery, and the eviction attempt proves intent to defraud. We're clear to move. He's all yours, detective, I said. Don't break down the door if you don't have to. It's mahogany. No promises, Beverly, he replied. See you at the station. I hung up and put the car in drive. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the silhouette of Marcus in the window, watching me leave. He thought he was watching a defeat. He didn't know he was watching the fuse burn down to the powder keg. I checked into a motel 3 miles away. It was a nondescript place, the kind where people go to disappear. I didn't unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the television without turning it on. I didn't need to see the news. I could see the scene in my head. I could visualize it with the clarity of a CAD rendering. It was 7 p.m. Marcus would be celebrating. He would have opened a bottle of champagne by now. He would be sitting on the white sofa, his feet up, scrolling through Zillow, picking out his new villa in Tuscany or his condo in Miami. He would be feeling the unparalleled high of getting away with it. Then the knock, not a polite tap, the heavy, authoritative pound of a police battering ram, testing the frame. I imagined him freezing, the glass halfway to his lips. The confusion. Who could that be? He would assume it was a neighbor, or maybe me coming back to beg for more time. He would open the door, annoyance written all over his face, and he would find Detective Hayes standing there. Hayes wasn't a large man, but he projected the density of a neutron star. Behind him would be 4 uniformed officers. Marcus Cole, Hayes would say, flashing his badge. Yes, Marcus would stammer. What is this? What's going on? I have a warrant for your arrest, Hayes would say, stepping into the foyer without asking. Charges include bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and forgery. I could see the color draining from Marcus's face. Froth. That's ridiculous. My wife handled the finances. She just died. This is harassment. We know about the Cayman accounts, Marcus Hayes would say calmly. We know about the $200,000 transfer from Beverly's equity line to the shell company in Georgetown, the one listed under your mother's maiden name. That would be the hammer blow. The victim card relied on ignorance. It relied on him being the clueless husband, but specific offshore accounts in his family's name that required intent, that required signatures. He would try to backpedal. I didn't know. Jasmine made me sign things. She was in trouble. She had gambling debts. She forced me. Save it for the interview room, Hayes would say. Cuff him. I imagined the cold steel of the handcuffs clicking around his wrists, the wrists that had poured my cognac an hour ago. The shock, the indignity. He would be marched out past the neighbors, past Mrs. Washington, who was undoubtedly watching from her porch with glee, and shoved into the back of a cruiser. I looked at the clock. 7:45 p.m. It was done. The house was secure. The predator was caged. My phone rang. It was Hayes. We have him, Hayes said. His voice was tight. But we have a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? We secured the laptop, Hayes said. The one he kept in the safe. The one you said had the digital trail of the blackmail. And it's bricked, Beverly Hayes said. Fried. As soon as we logged it into evidence, it initiated a remote wipe. A dead man's switch. Someone on the outside triggered it. I drove to the precinct in a daze. The plan had been perfect. The laptop was the smoking gun. It contained the emails where Marcus threatened to expose Jasmine's gambling debts to the IRS if she didn't help him steal the house. Without that laptop, it was just his word against a dead woman's. I met Hayes in the observation room. Looking into interrogation B, Marcus was sitting at the metal table. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked smug. Sitting next to him was a man in a suit that cost more than my car. Clayton Pierce. I knew Pierce by reputation. He was a fixer, a high-priced legal shark who specialized in getting white-collar criminals out of impossible corners. He was the one who had triggered the wipe. He called him the second we let him make a call, Hayes said, pacing the small room. By the time we got the laptop to cybercrimes, the drive was being rewritten with garbage data. It's gone, Beverly. The emails, the texts, the financial logs, all of it. I looked through the one-way glass. Pierce was whispering something to Marcus. Marcus smiled a cold, reptilian smile. What's their angle? I asked. They're pivoting, Hayes said. Pierce just told the DA that Marcus is the victim of a coercive, abusive wife. He claims Jasmine set up the offshore accounts to frame him. He claims Jasmine forged the deed and forced him to go along with it. With the digital evidence gone, we can't prove he was the mastermind. You have the forged deed, I said. Pierce claims he didn't know it was forged, Hayes said. He says he thought it was legitimate. Being the beneficiary of a fraud isn't the same as committing it, not without proof of intent. If they sell this story, he walks on the fraud charges. He might even keep the house. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. He's lying. We know he's lying, Hayes said. But knowing isn't proving. We need something concrete. Something Pierce can't remote wipe. I stared at Marcus. He looked so comfortable. He thought he had outsmarted the system. He thought technology was the only way to catch him. He thinks in binary, I muttered. He thinks in zeros and ones. Digital, cloud, remote. What are you talking about? Hayes asked. I'm an engineer, detective, I said, turning away from the glass. I don't trust the cloud. Clouds dissipate. I trust concrete. I trust steel. Beverly, where are you going with this? The laptop wasn't the only record, I said. Jasmine was terrified of him. She knew he was monitoring her phone and her email, so she went analog. She recorded their conversations on tape. Hayes blinked. Like cassettes? Yes, I said. But we have a problem. What? I thought they were in my go bag, I said. But when I checked in the car, the case was empty. I must have left the tapes in the cache. The cache. I built a safe into the house, I said. Not a wall safe behind a painting. A structural safe. It's cast directly into the load-bearing column in the basement foundation. You can't open it with a code. You can't wipe it remotely. How do we get it? We don't open it, I said grimly. We have to drill it out. We need a demolition team. Returning to the house felt like entering a crime scene, which, legally, it was. Yellow tape was draped across the front door. A patrol car sat in the driveway. I led Hayes and a team from the city's public works department down to the basement. It was a finished basement, carpeted and painted, but I walked straight to the central support pillar. It looked like a standard drywall column. Here, I said, tapping the wall. Behind this drywall is a reinforced concrete piling 3 feet thick. It supports the main crossbeam of the entire house. And the tapes are inside, Hayes asked, looking skeptical. When I poured the foundation for the renovation in '98, I explained, I embedded a lead-lined steel box into the wet concrete. I left a PVC feed tube to drop things in, but no way to take them out. It's a time capsule, or a black box. You built a black box for your house, one of the workers asked. I built a black box for my life, I corrected. Get the hammer drill. The worker fired up a heavy-duty Hilti drill with a diamond-tipped bit. The sound was deafening. Dust filled the air, coating our clothes in fine gray powder. It took 20 minutes just to breach the outer layer of concrete. I watched the drill bit grinding, inch by inch. This was the difference between Marcus and me. He built webs of lies that could be swept away with a keystroke. I built truths into the bedrock. Break through, the worker shouted. The drill lurched forward into a void. He pulled the drill back and used a sledgehammer to widen the hole. He reached a gloved hand inside the dark cavity. Got something, he grunted. He pulled out a dusty plastic bundle. It was wrapped in heavy-duty construction plastic. He handed it to me. I cut the plastic open with my pocket. Inside were 3 audio cassettes. Analog, I said, holding them up to Hayes. Unhackable. Hayes grabbed an evidence bag. Get these to the lab. I want them digitized and transcribed immediately. Wait, I said. There's something else. I reached into the hole again. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out. It wasn't a tape. It was a small, crushed velvet bag. I opened it. Inside was a heavy gold ring with a large emerald. What is that? Hayes asked. It's my class ring, I said, confused. I lost this 2 years ago. I thought I dropped it in the yard. Then it hit me. Jasmine. Jasmine put this here, I whispered. She must have known about the feed tube. I showed her when she was a kid. I turned the ring over. Wrapped tightly around the band was a small scrap of paper. I unfolded it. It was a receipt, a pawn shop receipt. She stole it, I realized. She stole it to gamble, but she couldn't go through with selling it, so she hid it here. She hid her shame in the foundation. I looked at the date on the receipt. It was from 3 years ago, the start of the spiral. This proves nothing about Marcus, Hayes said gently. It just proves Jasmine had a problem. No, I said, my mind racing. It proves she had access. And if she put this here, maybe she put something else here. I shone a flashlight into the hole. Deep in the back, lodged against the rebar, was a small, crumpled prescription bag. I fished it out. The label was faded but legible. CVS Pharmacy, patient, Beverly Thompson, medication, oxy, quantity, 30. My pain meds, I said, my blood running cold, from my back surgery last year. I thought I misplaced them. I accused the cleaning lady. Why would Jasmine hide your pain meds in the wall? Hayes asked. She didn't, I said. Jasmine was addicted to gambling, not pills. She was terrified of drugs. She wouldn't touch them. I looked at the bag again. There was something written on the back in frantic scrawled Sharpie. Found them. He says he's keeping them for insurance. If I don't sign the deed, he says he'll use them on me. God help me. The silence in the basement was absolute. The drill, the dust, the police, it all faded. He didn't just threaten to expose her, I said, my voice shaking. He threatened to kill her. And then he did. We had the note. We had the tapes. But Pierce was a monster in the courtroom. He would argue the note was forged by Jasmine to frame Marcus. He would argue the tapes were out of context. We needed a link, a physical link between Marcus and the act of murder. We were standing on the front lawn, the police lights flashing, when a voice called out from the hedge, "Is he gone? Is that devil finally gone?" I turned to see Mrs. Washington. She was 80 years old, wore a floral house dress, and spent most of her day watching the neighborhood from her porch. Marcus had despised her. Marcus had called her the neighborhood church lady and had once threatened to call code enforcement on her yard decorations. "He's in custody, Mrs. Washington," I said. "Good riddance." Mrs. Washington spat. She hobbled over, leaning on her cane. She looked at Detective Hayes. "Are you the police?" "I am," Hayes said. "You need to see my recordings," Mrs. Washington said. "Your recordings?" "My security cameras," Mrs. Washington said proudly. "I installed them last month. High definition, night vision to catch the kids who knock over my garden statues." "Mrs. Washington," I said, "what did you see?" "I saw him," she said, pointing a gnarled finger at my front door. "3 nights ago, the night poor Jasmine died." Hayes stepped forward. "What time?" 3 a.m., Mrs. Washington said. "I was up making tea. My arthritis was acting up. I got an alert on my iPad." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. It was attached to a keychain shaped like a cross. "He came out the side door," Mrs. Washington recounted. "He was wearing gloves, rubber cleaning gloves. He walked to your garbage cans, opened them, then shook his head. Then he walked to the neighbor's cans, the Millers, across the street. He put a small bag in there, disposing of evidence," Hayes muttered. "That's not all," Mrs. Washington said. "Then he went to the garden hose. He washed his hands, but he scrubbed them, detective-like he was trying to get paint off, or chemicals. Fentanyl," I whispered. "If he used patches, the residue is sticky. It's hard to get off." "I have it all in 4K, Mrs. Washington said, pressing the USB drive into Hayes's hand. "I saved it because he looked so guilty, and because I hoped he was breaking a law so I could report him." Hayes gripped the drive like it was a gold bar. "Mrs. Washington, you just became my favorite person in this city. Just make sure he doesn't come back," Mrs. Washington huffed. "And tell him the church lady sends her regards." While Hayes rushed the new evidence to the lab, I went to see Vivian. Pierce was on the warpath. He had filed an emergency motion to unfreeze the assets. He argued that without a murder charge which hadn't been filed yet, there was no legal standing to deny Marcus his inheritance. He was trying to loot the estate before the ship sank. We sat in Vivian's office, staring at the speakerphone. Pierce was on the line, sounding smug. "My client is suffering," Pierce drawled. "He is a grieving widower being persecuted by the state. The trust fund is rightfully his. We demand immediate disbursement of the $1.5 million to cover his legal defense." Vivian looked at me and winked. She leaned into the microphone. "We understand your position, Mr. Pierce," Vivian said smoothly, "and we are prepared to execute the trust's provisions. However, have you reviewed the amendment to the charter? The one dated 6 months ago." "I've reviewed the beneficiary clause," Pierce snapped. "It lists Marcus Cole as the sole secondary beneficiary." "Keep reading," Vivian said. "Article 9, Section 4, Subsection C." There was a silence on the line. I could hear papers shuffling. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "What is this?" Pierce asked, his voice losing its oily smoothness. "It's a clean hands provision," I said, speaking for the first time. "I engineered it myself. The clause states," Vivian read, "that in the event of the primary beneficiary's death, the secondary beneficiary may only access funds after a complete, independent forensic audit clears them of any direct or indirect involvement in financial or physical harm against the grantor or the primary beneficiary." This is absurd. Pierce sputtered. You can't enforce this. It gets better, I continued. The clause also states that by formally requesting the funds, the beneficiary automatically consents to a full discovery of all personal financial records to prove their innocence. A waiver of privacy clause. You trapped him, Pierce whispered. He realized what he had done. By filing the motion to get the money, he had legally opened the door for us to audit Marcus's entire life. He had handed us the keys to the Cayman accounts that the remote wipe was supposed to hide. You triggered the trap, Pierce, I said. You got greedy. Now, not only is the money frozen until the murder investigation is resolved, but you just gave the DA permission to subpoena every bank account he has. I'm withdrawing the motion, Pierce shouted. Too late, Vivian said, hitting the disconnect button. It's already filed. Vivian sat back and laughed. It was a dry, dusty laugh. Beverly, you brilliant woman, you really did think of everything. I didn't want to, I said softly. I really didn't want to be right. 2 hours later, we were in the DA's office. The atmosphere was electric. The pieces were coming together. The toxicology report is back, the assistant district attorney said, throwing a file on the table. It confirms it. Jasmine didn't die from street drugs. She died from a massive overdose of prescription oxycodone and fentanyl. Matches the stash found in the wall, Hayes said, and the bag Mrs. Washington saw him toss. We recovered it from the landfill. It's a long shot, but the lab found traces of the adhesive backing from fentanyl patches inside the plastic bag, and a partial fingerprint on the adhesive side. Whose fingerprint? I asked. Marcus's, Hayes said. He wore gloves to throw it away, but he must have taken one glove off to peel the backing off the patch. It's tricky to do with rubber gloves. He peeled the patch, I said, visualizing the scene. He put it on her. The tapes confirm the motive, Hayes added. We have him on audio telling her, if you don't fix this, I will fix you. We have him admitting to the forgery. We have the financial motive, and now we have the murder weapon. This isn't fraud anymore, the DA said. This is capital murder. The deposition room was cold and sterile. Marcus was there, looking haggard. The orange jumpsuit washed out his complexion. Pierce sat beside him, but he looked defeated. The poison pill had destroyed his defense strategy, and the fingerprint had destroyed his leverage. Hayes placed a small cassette player on the table. We recovered this from the foundation of the house, Hayes said. Jasmine recorded everything. Marcus, he stared at the player, his eyes wide. Hayes pressed play. The sound was grainy, but the voices were clear. Jasmine's voice, sobbing. Marcus, please, I can't do it. I can't steal her house. She's my mom. Marcus's voice, cold and hard. You are weak, Jasmine. You are a pathetic, weak little woman. If you don't sign those papers, I'm sending the photos of you at the casino to her. I'm sending them to your boss. You'll be ruined. Jasmine, I'll tell her. I'll tell her everything. Marcus, you won't say a word, because if you do, I have insurance. Remember the pills, Jasmine, the ones I found, one of those on your skin while you sleep, and you just don't wake up. It would look like such a tragic accident. The tape clicked off. Marcus was trembling. He wasn't smirking anymore. He was shaking with genuine terror. That's manipulated, Pierce tried to say, but his heart wasn't in it. It's analog, I said from the corner of the room. No deepfakes, no edits, just the truth. The DA leaned forward. Here is the deal, Marcus. We have the fingerprint on the patch backing. We have the video of you dumping the evidence. We have the motive. We go to trial. We go for the death penalty. Marcus flinched. Or, the DA continued, you plead guilty to everything: the fraud, the forgery, and murder in the first degree. You give us a full allocution. You tell us exactly how you did it, and you take life without parole. Marcus looked at Pierce. Pierce didn't look back. He was busy packing his briefcase. He knew when a building was coming down. Marcus's voice was a whisper. I just wanted the money. She was going to give it away. She was going to waste it. You killed her for a house, I said. He looked at me, his eyes filled with hate. She was weak, Beverly, just like you made her. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. She was weak, I agreed, but I'm not. Take the deal, Marcus. He slumped in his chair. I'll take it. The house was quiet. The yellow tape was gone. The police were gone. The smell of white roses had finally faded, replaced by the scent of dust and old wood. I walked through the rooms. I touched the walls. They were solid. The foundation was secure. The legal title was back in my name. The bank accounts were restored. The trust fund was locked down. waiting for a beneficiary that would never come. I sat in Leonard's chair. It felt different now. It felt bigger. Or maybe I had just become smaller. I looked at the photo of Jasmine on the mantel. She was smiling that bright, beautiful smile she had inherited from her father. Marcus was right. She had been weak, and that was my fault. I had engineered her life to be I had smoothed out every bump, absorbed every shock. I had built her a life with no stress points. So when the first real pressure was applied, she didn't bend. She shattered. I had protected her from the world, but I hadn't protected her from herself. And I hadn't protected her from the one thing I couldn't engineer away: human greed. I had won. The predator was in a cage. The assets were safe. The system had worked perfectly. But as I sat there in the silence, listening to the settling groans of the house I had built with my own hands, I realized the terrible truth of my victory. I was the queen of an empty castle. I was the architect of a fortress with no one inside to protect. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Mrs. Washington was watering her garden, her security camera blinking red in the twilight. Life went on. I would go on too. I was an engineer. We don't stop when the structure fails. We analyze the data. We clear the debris. And we build again. But tonight, I would just sit in the dark and mourn the girl who wasn't strong enough to survive the design. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say, you were here.